Christmas. Happy holidays. I'm so happy to be back sharing energy with you guys today. I'm really excited because today we have a guest who has really lived a life in full. Her journey started in Casper, Wyoming, and has taken her from Alaska to Holland to Doharan and a few places in between. By day, she is immersed in the world of all things health and healing as the director of a women's clinic in California. But she is definitely more than meets the eye. Heather is an activist. She is a parent. She is a spouse. And she's a keeper of the land. I'm so excited for you guys to hear how her unique perspective was formed from early cultural immersion. It's so good to have you on today.
Well, hello. It's good to be here.
Yes, yeah. I want to kind of catch the listeners up on the intro. I threw a word up there that many of us may not be familiar with, Doharan. Where is this place, and how does a girl from Casper, Wyoming, end up there?
Well, Doharan is actually in Saudi Arabia, and so I grew up there. I was raised in Saudi Arabia from the time I was 2 until I was 12 years old. My father was in the military, and we kind of bounced around a lot, and so we ended up, we left, I was born in Casper, and then we went to El Paso. From El Paso, he got a job with Aramco, which is an Arabian American oil company, which is what brought us to Saudi Arabia. And so then I was raised there, and that's where everything started for me, really.
Really? So if you start from Casper, Wyoming, and you end up going to Saudi Arabia, which I couldn't think of any place further from Casper, Wyoming
right.
to be. So you get there, when you're in the Middle East, you're clearly a minority, I would imagine. How did you kind of go about handling that?
Well, one of the things that my dad always taught me is, and I started with this very early, was to understand that when you're in a different country or when you come across different cultures, that we should always try to accept and understand different cultures and what cultural traditions are, and what cultures mean to people, because that's really truly how you understand people and how you get to know who people really are, and maybe the ways they think about things or things that they do. It comes from their cultural history and background, and that's what makes people who they are. Right.
So you're having to kind of adjust and assimilate to the customs. I would imagine food, as a chef, I think about that. Was food a big part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had to learn to, immerse myself. I had Arabic friends. There was many different cultures in Saudi Arabia. But one of the things that I always did is that if I was taking part and I was hanging out with my, Arabic friends, and I would go to their houses for dinners or sleepovers or whatever you do when you're a kid, I was immersed in their culture. And if that meant that we were doing the traditional quote unquote boat grab, as they call it, I would immerse myself in that. And it was, learning the culture of the men are all going to eat first, and they're all going to pull their goat and eat, and the women and children are going to wait until the men are done. And then you go ahead and get in there once they say it's okay.
Now, when you say goat grab, okay, go ahead.
So it may not have been what I wanted to do, being an animal lover and everything else. I'm by no means a vegetarian, but, it's really different when you have a piece of steak or a burger on your plate versus an entire body of a goat on a platter on the floor, and you're reaching into it and grabbing pieces of meat off of that goat to eat it. And that perspective is much different than how we traditionally eat.
So when you say goat grab, you mean literally grabbing the goat with your hand?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Just wanted to be clear for that, because you said that, and I thought goat grab. Now, it's in my country and I'm from America, but my parents are West Indian, so we definitely are familiar with goat. But usually we use utensils, so that is a whole new thing for me. Definitely a different thing. Were there any differences that stood out to you culturally, besides the food and that kind of thing, and learning the language? Were there any things that stood out to you besides that?
Well, Saudi Arabia was kind of really one of the first places at a very early age where I really started to question or understand what slavery was about. Oddly enough, being in Arabia, working for Aramco, Aramco was a company where they hired people from all over the world. So we lived in this quote-unquote gated American compound that had guards there, but there was people from Europe, from India, from Sri Lanka, Pakistan. You had Arab nations, American nations. You had all of these different countries all together in one place and going to school together.
Right.
I was learning Arabic in school. But we had, when you work for the company, you are given what we then were called houseboy. And we had a gentleman that lived with us. His name was Raja. For the entire time that we were there, we had the same gentleman. And at a very early age in school there, we started learning about the Civil War and slavery. Third and fourth grade, we were already getting into that over there. And I started to question as he was working for us. That's when I first started to question my dad about, is Raja really working for us because he wants to work for us and this is his job and he's getting paid to do it? Or is he being forced to do this? Because it was strange to me to have somebody who was coming and being kind of like, doing this job and taking care of me while my dad was working, because my dad was a single father at the time.
Right. So Raja was kind of like an au pair or a nanny. And did he really feel like family to you, or did it feel like he was working? Was he very professional? I mean, I imagine he was professional, but was there a blurred line of like, I love this person?
I think at the beginning, it was just, when first getting into it, and when my parents first got divorced, and my dad and I were just there, he was just kind of the guy who was working there. But as I got older and things progressed, you develop a relationship with this person, and so he did become much more than just our quote-unquote houseboy. I did really start to, feel like he was part of the family because he was a fixture. He was always there.
Okay. So, but before you got to that point, you were asking those questions to your father about whether or not he wanted it, or was this something he was forced to do?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had it was he was he cooked for me. You know what I mean? He helped. This is right. This is the person who taught me how to do laundry. So it got to a point to where it was much more than just he was there and I was asking him to do things. He was there and we played games, or he would help teach me how to do laundry. He taught me how to cook. I wouldn't know how to cook curry today if it wasn't from him. He was from Sri Lanka. And so I learned how to make curry because he taught me how.
Wow. So that's just, so there was a real relationship that's formed. That's something that I understand is that this is a normal culture around the world, not just in Saudi Arabia, where people usually have people in the house. But I found your perspective fascinating, Heather, where you were thinking, even as a child, about what that meant in regards to the American history of slavery and the rest of it. And how you were putting and connecting those dots together, and then being conflicted because you have a relationship, you love this person, he cares and loves you and takes care of you like a parent would. Right. And so there's a lot there that I think would definitely kind of open your eyes and help you to shift the way that you think,
Right.
So you come back, and you're back in America, and you're starting to find yourself. And now, at this point in your life, you're the director of a women's clinic. I know there's a lot that happened in between. I just want to know, how did your time abroad affect the way that you view women's rights?
Living on the American compound, as they so called it, within the gates of that community, women had much more rights than they did the second that you left those protected gates. So on the American compound, women could drive to and from work or to and from the store, but they were not allowed to drive outside of those gates. They had to be covered outside of the gates, but they could just wear jeans and T-shirts when they were inside of the compound. So looking at it really gave me a different appreciation for the women's rights that we have here today, and not necessarily take those for granted, and to really appreciate the fight and the struggle that got us to where we are now, and having a right to vote and having a say-so in what we do, and being able to wear whatever we want and, drive and not have to worry about, if I go outside of the gates, I'm not allowed to do that.
Right. There are so many wonderful privileges that I think we might take for granted only because we have not been immersed in another culture to see that there is truly a difference in the way we live as American people, women, people in general. But the rights of a people, I think, is just really been coming to the forefront lately. And I'm not just talking about African American, I'm talking about our LGBT community as well. And so that's something that I think we'll get into in a little bit. But I definitely think that being abroad, I think you can just see the way that everything is different, and it's just not to be taken for granted some of the privileges we have here. I think that's so important. As we started, Heather, in your intro, I called you the keeper of the land. And I know that you spent some time in Alaska as a ranger, and you can certainly talk about that. I also know that you, since you were young, have had a call to the Hawaiian Islands. And I find this fascinating from some of the work I do with my clients. I would love it if you could share with the listeners how that thread to the Hawaiian Islands was a clue to your destiny.
Well, interestingly enough, from the time I was very young, as we worked for Remco, they had great benefits. And so my dad got like 6 weeks paid vacation every year. We would basically just go all over the world. We traveled all kinds of places. The interesting thing about that, though, is that I had this really huge desire to go to Hawaii. That's where I wanted to be, was in the Hawaiian Islands. I wanted to go on vacation there, specifically Maui. And I'm not, at the time I wasn't really sure what the big draw was. Sure, you could equate it to, that's the place that everybody goes for vacation. It's the big tourist place.
Right.
I never really wanted to go there because he, had spent some time at Schofield Barracks when he was in the military and just was not really excited about going there. So he never actually took me to Hawaii. I ended up meeting some folks when I was living in Los Angeles and became very close friends with them, and they were Native Hawaiian. And as it turns out, they owned some property above my now life partner, whom I met through them. And so, I've kind of equated it to my draw to Hawaii was probably my fate in being with Suzette.
Right. And that draw to Hawaii, I mean, you talk about land a lot. We talk about land and farming and all of that. What is the Hawaiian word for keeping the land, or what is the Hawaiian word for land?
Aina. So,
Aina.
Yeah. So, so people who are farmers or cultivate the land or have a lot of respect for the land, and Hawaiian culture, and I am by no way, shape, or form an expert on Hawaiian culture or whatsoever. But the one thing that I do really pride myself on is that no matter what, where I am, I do try to immerse myself into the culture and really learn about the indigenous ways of the people and the culture and what their ancestors did and what it truly means to them. Hawaii is one of those cultures who takes great pride in their ancestors and their native
right.
And so this is something that, I am a firm believer in. When you go to places like that and it is such a big deal to them, that you respect that and you honor that and you learn the appropriate and proper ways to handle the land, to respect the people, to respect their history. It's what we should do because being a privileged white person who's had the opportunity to travel to all different places of the world doesn't entitle me to not respect what their life is and to really learn their true stories.
I think that's so important, such an important message for our listeners, that no matter what your privilege is or your level of privilege, we all have a certain level of privilege if we're coming from America, honestly, no matter how we feel about it from day to day. And it is our responsibility to understand another person's culture. I think that America, in many ways, can be very close to this. So now we are a melting pot. A lot of us speak many languages, but I find that there's this kind of myopic focus on just us and all things American. And I do wish it was more global. I think that there is so much that the world has to offer. So